Good morning and welcome to this UK-India Business Council webinar on e-learning in India. My name is Jesh Rajasingham, Sector Manager for Skills and Education, and I'll be moderating this session this morning. India is home to more than 243 million internet users and is the third largest internet market in the world, making it a key market in which to both launch and develop e-learning platforms. Despite a huge existing market, around 70% of the population currently live in rural areas, and India faces a rural-urban internet divide that has created a two-speed internet access across much of the country. In this webinar with the British Council, we will explore the different e-learning approaches that might work in a two-speed India and the different opportunities that they represent. This webinar is the second in our e-learning in India series, and it follows the launch of our e-learning white paper. The next webinar on e-learning will take place on the 18th of August, covering innovations in e-learning and how they can be applied to India. Registrations are now open. You may also wish to look for the hashtag e-learning on Twitter to join the Twitter discussions and debate. Before we begin, I would like to familiarise you with the toolbox on the right-hand side of your screens. Just to let you know, we'll have everyone on mute during the course of the webinar to keep any background noise to a minimum. But if you have a question, please drop it into the little bracket on the toolbox to your right in the Please Type Your Question Here section to send me your question, and I'll take it up during our Q&A session at the end. For now, to make sure you can all hear me clearly, could I please ask that you all use the Raise Your Hand button on the toolbar? Could you please click the Raise Your Hand button now? Okay, thank you. I would now like to welcome Pratik Berman, Head of Business Development, English Partnerships at the British Council, to provide an overview of e-learning, learning technologies initiatives in the Indian context and discuss those that work well in rural and urban settings.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Pratik. I have been associated with e-learning or digital education for now 5 years in India, 2 years specifically with the British Council. And I've been lucky enough to play different kinds of roles during my 5 years. I have worked from business development, fundraising, product development, and strategy for a startup and then for the British Council. So I'll try and ensure that I share what has worked in those 5 years for me and what I've seen in the market and implementation of technology. This picture, these are all 4 clicks that I've had during my 5 years. This picture actually depicts for me India, where innovation, best utilization of resources, and piggybacking on existing infrastructure is the way education is being delivered digitally. Most of what you see in the Tier 3 or the rural markets in India, the infrastructure exists for reasons other than education, but is now being leveraged for education. So in the next slide is basically the introduction to the topic, and then I'll give you the way I want to take the session forward. The idea is that I'll give you an overview of what the British Council has done in India, how we have approached it, and then the learning section, where I'll talk to you about what has worked for us and for others, and at the end we can definitely have a question and answer session on what do you think about, and if you have any clarification that I can help with. Right. So in the next slide, basically we can skip these slides and we can go to the introduction slide or the background slide for the British Council. Yeah, I've done the overview slide. Let's do the So British Council in India does teacher education, face-to-face learner education, and delivers exams. We've worked with stakeholders across various levels, learners, teachers, policymakers, and in the last 3 years, we've definitely forayed into multiple ways of delivering digital or e-learning education in English in India. We worked with NGOs, we worked with state governments. There's a remarkable change in the way openness or acceptability of digital education is being perceived. With the incumbent government, it's also a focus area for them. And it changes how the landscape of the country will be impacted. Earlier, the problem was that the entire funds available for digital education was for infrastructure. So value for quality content was not there. But now the idea is that digital education is not just a computer lab, it's also about quality content, and it's also about content that is relevant. India has had a tricky past where multiple government stakeholders have come up and told me that Pratik, we have bought solutions, but they didn't deliver on our expectations. So senior policymakers, stakeholders in the government, stakeholders in large-scale private ventures are now much more adept at evaluating opportunities and options available in the market. So in the next slide, we'll talk about which audiences has the British Council worked with, and that will help you understand our focus areas and where our learnings are coming from. So if you look at the demographics that I mentioned in the slide, this is where there are two large markets for education in India: the formal education or the school market, K-12, or the employability and the vocational market. So we basically focus on rural, semi-urban areas. We look at young adults, aspirational, people who want to do better in life. A huge amount of opportunity exists for employability skills, communication skills, vocational skills. The reason is you must know about NSDC, the project started by the earlier government, where the idea is to skill 500 million people by 2022. The project is a focus area for this government, and in the last few days, if you have been following the news, especially his visit in China and the news coming out of the Ministry of Human Resources, vocational education is going to get tighter linked to the formal education. Children who want to pursue vocational education will get opportunities as early as Standard 9, which is a complete shift to what currently was happening. And it's not just education, it's also employment. The scheme funds organizations that guarantee 70% placement, so or jobs. So it's very important that there's a tight linkage. As British Council, our focus is English, and we work. We've ensured that for the market like India, we have products that cater to language proficiency, and also cater to soft skills, interview skills, and I'll come in details later, where you will find out how we contextualize it. So moving on to the next slide. We look at what's one of the key success factors in India. One of the key success factors in India is multimode delivery. In India, if you have a product which works on one platform, one technology, or one access mode, there is a challenge. You need to ensure that you are flexible and you are able to satisfy, as aptly said in the title, the two speed India's requirements. Though there are staggering facts about internet connectivity and number of internet users in India, the bandwidth allocation in India is not that high, and that has its own set of challenges. The urban youth or the urban consumer is looking for media-rich content, but the infrastructure currently doesn't support or doesn't allow free access on mobile of high-res videos, if you say in that aspect. But the good part is that innovators and technology experts in India are working on different modes of providing content which can be downloaded. YouTube has been offered offline video watching for India, where this whole discussion started. So it's great that people are innovating to provide high quality experience in challenged situations. India is a market which is moving from no internet access to internet on phone. The transition to internet on a PC or a laptop hasn't happened to a large audience. By facts, we are more than 900 million subscribers in India. We're the fastest growing rate for penetration of 3G internet in the world. We're consuming the largest amount of smart devices. So it is no surprise. In my experiences with product development and talking to young learners, they actually do not know what is a mouse, but they can drag and resize on a tablet or a phone with ease. So that's something to think about when we design products and offerings for this market. Moving on to the next slide, so when we started talking about digital education for language learning, there was a huge challenge where especially government stakeholders came back to us and said, but why? Why do you think this works, or what's the benefit? Currently also, if you look at youth or urban population in India, there is respect towards digital education. But as you go deeper, the value for or the intensity of a digital course or an e-learning course is something which is questionable to the market, because they feel that a learner which has gone through that kind of a engagement doesn't have in-depth knowledge. And so the idea is to ensure that because it's digital, there is so much more that we can offer the learner. There is in-depth measurability, trackability. The certificate doesn't come for free. There is a lot of there is assessments. There is continuous progression, and so all of this helps. And so imagine the two challenges. The challenges of access. If you look at an urban city, the consumer might have a challenge of traveling long distances because of the busy lives for accessing a product. So for them, the access is this. For a rural learner, the problem is that the access point may be so far away that is also a time consumption. But then in rural India, the challenge is, do you have last mile internet penetration? How do you work around it? What technology platforms do you use? And how do you ensure that is there? How British Council is working on digital education is we are working with partners. We are working with partners who are there in the market, who are present in the nook and corners, who are connected to the communities, and who are able to ensure that there is a cohesion between learning and between coming to the center and participating as a community. So let's go to the next slide and look at what's happening in more detail. So let me share what we have seen in the rural sector when we are working for India. As I said, it's of primary importance to work with someone who has a proven track record if you're looking for delivery. And it's very important that your partner has the last mile reach. You need to leverage infrastructure. There are a lot of government schemes in the market that are creating internet infrastructure in these markets. These are schemes that leverage the e-governance portals. They leverage, there's a scheme in India which provides minimum amount of employment to everyone. That scheme also has funding by the Michael Susan Dell Foundation, by other larger bodies to create these resource centers where users can come and track their due payment and their income. So this is where you have to look at innovative partnerships. These organizations might not be into education, but they can help you, break that barrier. Would you have the exact kind of delivery mechanism that you want in an ideal world? No. If you go to rural India, you have to be flexible. We at the British Council are very, very focused on the kind of people we want to engage with the learners when they are participating. When we approach these partners, we ensure that we would utilize the available resource to its best potential. through trainings, through workshops, through very regular interaction. Secondly, one thing which on my personal experience I realized in the rural market is you need to look at a lifetime value. You can't look at transactions. There is a lot, if just to give you a weird stat, around 80% of the prepaid mobile customers in India have less than 10 rupees as their balance. That's 10 cents. Now, you can design the world's best product on mobile, but if they don't have the balance, they can't purchase it. Providers have come up with stepwise pricing. So you can create a product which charges 5 rupees. So if you have a 10 rupees balance, for 5 rupees, you'll be able to get some part of the content. Again, the idea is to ensure that there is enough meat in the first level offering that the customer stays with you through the journey. A rural learner has plethora to learn, and there is so much that you can work with them on, that it makes much more sense that you take them through the journey, start with a product which meets an immediate need, it's linked to their current challenges, it's affordable, and then you can scale it up. Now, as I said, ensure contextual usage of content and technology. You need to ensure that your products mimic it. We had a product for Urban India which was on a Google App Store. It's a video-based product. When we went to rural market, we came across the challenge of bandwidth for downloading videos or watching videos online. We worked with one of the large telecom operators in India and ensured that the same product with tweaks and with supporting material was converted into an IVR and is available on phone. And with immense penetration, it at least bridges that gap where internet is not available. The resource can be accessed over a phone. Intermittent internet access led us to develop the same product on a downloadable option, where a user could download the product on a device, so that if they do not have continuous internet access, they can still use the product. So this is what the landscape of rural India brings to your plate. And on the contrary, when you look at urban India, things change in the next slide. So the urban customer in India is aspirational. There are three. Okay, so sorry, I jumped a slide. So let me explain the context of this case study, and I'm sure you're going to read it in detail later. So Digital Empowerment Foundation is a respected NGO in India, which had 32 centers across India, and they were working with Intel, Microsoft, and other funding organizations to create these cluster resource centers where, as I said, people could come for e-governance issues, whether it was legal, whether it was status, whether it was payments, whether it was children applying for colleges and education, whatever it was. And they had these centers, and in one of the seminars, I met their founder, and we had a discussion, and he said, can you give me a way to best utilize my centers and also ensure education is delivered? So we internally had a discussion. We had a product under development which is called Manzil, and as British Council products go, it's a story. It's not just content being delivered one slide after the other, and it talks about how a village boy comes to a city and learns what happens in a city and then looks for a job. So a user from this DEF center has similar aspirations in life. They are from a small town or a small city. They are looking for a job. They want to understand what happens in the big city. And so the product takes them through these. And it starts with language understanding, a bit of written communication, and then employability. Now the challenge was, this was a complete online course. Now, how do you deal with it? And what do you do with it? So I went to them and I said, internet connectivity, how do we solve this? So fortunately, they were having internet infrastructure to meet the other requirements. And we were able to work with them. So we had a training where we called the center heads from all the 32 centers, from as far as Northeast to Rajasthan to Chennai. We had across India represented in a workshop for 2 days. We taught the center owners how to support learners during the course, because we understand that for the first time a learner doing a modular course with examinations, with assessment, and at the end of the day going for a certification, it's not easy. So we ensured there is support, we ensured they understand and answered basic queries, we provided materials for them for FAQs, and we do a bi-monthly Skype call to reinforce this. And surprisingly, it's been just a few weeks into this, and the first batch is now coming to an end. There are the next two, the second and the third batch are already on. So it's great to see those learners learning, and we're going to work on doing a more detailed piece of work and showcasing how you can leverage other infrastructure to deliver education. So that was a great thing for us. Going on to the next slide, looking at supporting aspirations of urban India. So it's such an interesting difference. In the urban India, language, or for us, British Council, and for any education provider, these are the basic burning questions: social mobility, employability, and career progression. Social mobility in India is now becoming something which is very relevant because of BPOs, because of software jobs. There are kids or youth that has come from varied backgrounds is now working in an urban city, earning a respectable amount of money, and they now want to move up the social ladder. Employability is a continuous burning question in a country like ours. We have challenges on polishing qualified people. So that's going to be a big area of concern. Career progression. And, it was very interesting when there were multiple articles when Coursera started getting popular in India 3-4 years back, that most corporates were asking their senior leadership to go and do courses on Coursera. There's a lot of recognition for digital education and e-learning by the formal sector. The informal sector is now realizing that yes, this is a good tool to bridge gap, cost effective, adds value. What are the challenges then? The challenges is, as you see on the slide, very low acceptance of the B2C offer, direct purchase by clients. It's more through partners, through businesses. The reason is, I guess, the educated B2C customer believes content on online or internet should be free. That's an interesting challenge. And the ones that need it might not even know what to pick, how to pick, and might not even have ability to pay online, which is a big concern in India. We have 2% penetration for credit card payments. So these factors, impact acceptability of B2C offers. Loads of educational players in India have tried it, very few have been successful with it. As I said, value for e-learning courses, justifying value against free resources. India is a certification-driven market. How many times have we worked with people in India, and in my 5 years, I've come back with one question: is there a certificate? Even if it's a 5-hour course, 5-hour content. And the reason is that the next person will only believe that you have done something if you have a certificate to show. So that's a challenge. So I think over the last 20 minutes, I've tried to showcase what has happened. If you go to the next slide, I've tried to put across some things to remember when you talk about India and e-learning and content. The word contextualization just doesn't mean a translation to an Indian language. It's also contextualized to challenges and technology in India. As I said, a brilliant product that works on a web browser on a computer might not be acceptable to the large market which is working on touch phone. So it's contextualized to technology and contextualized to consumption patterns. Most of the players in India have realized that India is a bite-sized market for consumption. So your product has to ensure that learning is provided in complete bite packages. And it also has impact in technology, where you have products where you download only that specific bite sizes rather than downloading tons and tons of data. You have to have multiple delivery mechanisms of the same content, whether it's audio, video, text, to ensure that even if people do not have the right kind of infrastructure and bandwidth, they're able to use it. If you're working with partners in India, if you're working with funding agencies, if you're working with NGOs, the focus will be how impactful the course is, how impact-led it is, what are the learning outcomes, what do the learners take away from it, is it measurable, is it trackable. There's a huge market for India which is examination linked, whether it's international examinations, Indian examinations, linked to Indian curriculum, external curriculum. There's this whole demand for curriculum linkage. And there are brilliant content providers globally that have come to India, but the challenge has been that the content is too alien for the Indian audiences. I'll give you an example. If you bring a nursery rhyme which talks about hamsters in India, Indian kids might have never heard about hamsters if they're not from a very urban, up mobile kind of a family. So that should give you a perspective. I think I've done a fair bit of talking, haven't I? So yeah, if you have anything that you want to ask me, you can go ahead. And if there is a pause, I can share another example of the work we have done here.
Okay, do feel free to send us some questions. Just type them into the toolbar on the right-hand side of the screen. So we've got one question in from Sanjeev Roy, Pratik, and that's to do with the rural sector of the population. Sanjeev asks, for that group of young rural learners, which is the best approach to engage with those learners? Would it be through a local institute or through e-learning?
Thanks, Sanjeev, for the question. Both approaches have merits to it, but just to explain, awareness for that audience will come from word of mouth on the street. And so if you create e-learning content, that also has to work with a local partner, because the consumption of the content, the rural youth might not have computers or internet access at their home, and they will have to come to centers, cafes, or public access areas. So that's one challenge. Working with a local partner, I think one thing that has been working in India very well is the blend of technology and face-to-face. Where whether it's Khan Academy, whether it's Brush Council, we have been able to flip classrooms. We've been ensuring that teachers can have best resources to train learners on concepts and then spend their time engaging learners in the classroom and providing more individualized attention. So you could look at, so you need a local partner to ensure awareness and ensure accessibility, because your rural learner might not have ability to pay online. So you need somebody to even collect payments. So you have to work with a local partner, but you can always look at whether the partner is a marketing channel or a delivery channel, based on the infrastructure and based on the kind of content you want to deliver.
We've got another question in Pratik to do with HEIs in India. To what extent do local HEIs deliver higher education online? And is there yet a significant market for overseas providers in this area?
Higher education content delivery in India is basically, if you look at India has large number of technology institutes and colleges, other training higher education courses, and there is a lot of potential in this market to, I'm an engineer myself, and most of my books, resources, publications came from international publishers and organizations. So there is an acceptance of that content. Very little digitization of resources has happened. Most of classrooms even in an engineering college are based on a presentation delivered by a lecturer rather than mapped e-learning content. So there is potential in the market. The only challenge is that higher education in India is university-led, and ensuring that you are able to cater to that market, you have to align your content to a university's curriculum. You can, but by no means this is a small market. The university that I belong to ran more than 150 engineering colleges in one state in India, and resulted in 50,000 engineers passing out every year. So 2 lakh engineers at one point of time. So that's the kind of scale that you can achieve even if you partner with one.
Thank you, Pratik. What about, we've got another question from Sanjeev again, Sanjeev Roy. What about recognition of certification through e-learning on the part of employers?
Okay. So Sanjeev, that's a very relevant question, and we've had a discussion internally for ages on that. 5 years back, there was hardly any acceptance because at that point of time, the e-learning courses that were available in India, they were giving certifications on participation. So you go through a course and you get a certificate. So acceptance of certification has come in where it's linked to assessments. And it's not just one exam at the end, it's linked to continuous assessments. And if you ensure that your product design has it incorporated, and your certificate measures it and mentions it, there is acceptance. Again, there is a link to the brand that's being associated with the certificate. And in India, if you're working with a partner, the partner would like to be present on the certificate. But definitely, a key thing is that certification in online education has a lot of value, is a gaining acceptance, and employers do give it far more weightage than they used to. It's still a step below face-to-face education and face-to-face training, and which is fine. But as long as there is credit given to a learner for going through an online course and achieving a certain set of score, that's great.
Thank you very much, Pratik, for your presentation and also your inputs into the discussion. I found that very insightful. Thank you very much, everybody, for your time, and I hope this webinar was valuable for you. If you have any feedback or comments about today's session or a session that you'd like to see us do in the future, please do get in touch with us here at the UK IBC, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.